when you're in a mob, you lose your ability to think critically. It's not good. When you're outside of the mob, your ability to think critically can be affected. We saw this with COVID. We saw this. We saw little mobs developing, people who were sure of themselves, certain that they knew the right answer for absolutely everybody, and anyone who's outside of their circle was demonized, ridiculed, less than. We saw, as time went by, the ability to think critically, no matter what side you were on, was getting smaller and smaller. And you would encounter people, and the judgments were thick and fast coming out of them on one side or the other. And frankly, it didn't matter what side you were on. If you lost your critical thinking ability or you condemned someone who didn't think like you, you were part of a mob. My friends, Christ doesn't need us to be part of a mob. It's not going to help his cause. And it sure isn't bringing about any dignity in us. Inside of our churches, our faith denominations, we find mobs. We can be afraid that if we say the wrong thing or step out of line, the mob will turn on us. What I want you to think about today, and what I think about regularly, is where am I afraid of the mob? Where might the mob, the reality of the mob, cloud my thinking so that putting me in a position where I could make the wrong choice or decision, like St. Peter did when he denied knowing Christ? It gets tricky because sometimes the mobs are inside our church. Sometimes the mobs seem to be advocating something good, and yet there's a little something off, something that makes you uncomfortable. It makes you think, I really don't want to sit next to that person. They're too sure of themselves. We see this. Oh my God. In this time with media, we see lots of celebrities popping up within our faith communities, within our Catholic Church even. And everybody goes, yeah, that way, yeah, that way. They're mobs. These are mobs. Don't do it. Don't be too sure of yourself. At the very least, I wouldn't be too sure of who the good guys are or who the bad guys are. Just try to be someone connected to Christ, faithful to your church, and open to the fact that humanity is still flawed and vulnerable to making flawed decisions and choices. We are a hierarchical structure in our Catholic faith. We have a leader identified for us. God is very big and very powerful. The machinations of human scheming and it's not for you. It's not for me. Christian living will not include being part of a mob. It will mean being part of a communion of saints who are light bearers. We are bearing the light of Christ to the people around us. We are sowing the light of Christ in the next generation. So maybe that's a good way to think. What are you doing, if you're a Christian, to make sure that the light of Christ will remain after you're gone? That's a good exercise. How can I ensure, either by catechizing a young person, just setting a good example of fidelity to your faith, to Christ, a good example of humility and love, being a witness to the anguish of someone? How are you setting an example or ensuring that the light of Christ will go on after you're gone? It's a really good question. It's a good question for all of us.